Welcome to PK Woodworking. Today is going to be a little bit of a different kind of a video because we're going to be talking about putting on that room on the back side of the shop that's going to fit the dust collector and the air compressor and the air dryer and storage, etc. The reason I started inside today was kind of twofold. Windy here in Southern California. Many of you may know about the fires that are going on not near where I live. I feel for those people desperately. The reason why I started inside though is because it will be loud outside, so I'm going to take off my microphone when we get out there finally. But if you looked up there, maybe you can see, maybe you can't. I drilled a hole, a pilot hole, that went through the stucco on the outside so I can kind of reference where I'm going to need to cut that hole in the stucco outside and inside on the plywood. So I have the space for the 8-inch duct to come from outside in, and then the extra space to make it bigger for the air return so that as it's sucking air in, it's got a place for the air to go, which would be back in here. You're gonna kind of see me for the rest of this on the outside. And again, I won't have the microphone on me because I'll probably fall off when I'm working. Much of this is gonna be some time lapse or sped up video. I'll talk over it probably while we're going. And then we'll slow down a little bit for some of the things like installing the roll-up door, etc. when my son will probably help me have to lift that stuff up because it's gonna be complicated. And let me show you that for just a second. Roll-up door behind me. It's got two arms that attach to the brackets on either side of the roll-up door. And the installation is really simple based on the video at least that I've watched. The challenging part is that normally you lean it down onto the ground and they tell you need to have like 7+ feet because it's 7 foot tall, 7+ feet of a flat space to lay it down upon. Obviously, when you'll see outside, I don't have that. I've got like a 4 foot wide piece of concrete. So we're gonna have to lay it down, mount those arms on it, and then tilt it up temporarily on the piece of concrete and up against the wall so I can put the front wall in and frame that front wall and get it, like all strong. And then Matt and I can tilt it up and install it, and hopefully it goes as easy as I think it will. So time to bring you outside now. So this is the outside space that I had poured originally as soon as they were pouring that piece of sidewalk along the side of the house. And I had it put there because I had a feeling at some point in time I was going to end up doing exactly what I'm doing now. So that piece of concrete is actually at that level 4 feet deep and about 12 feet wide. I chose to only use 4x10 of it, and I butted the end of the room up against the far end on your right as you're looking at it. The entire shape of this fits the dust collector pretty well. The opening that's going to be in this is going to fit where the bin opens up on the dust collector on purpose. If I ever had to get the dust collector out of the actual room after it's built, it would fit through the opening in the front. Maybe a bit challenging to actually get it out of it. Beyond that though, and up and out of the space that it's in, because as you can see from the landscape that's all around it, there's a really big olive tree right there that's not helping the situation. And then I've got a 2-foot lip that goes up to that large patio we have back there. And at the same time, I can't get it around the back side where that sidewalk is because of the mini splits that are there. So it would require getting it out, getting it on a piece of plywood, moving some stuff around, getting someone to help me up a ramp onto that bigger patio that you see off to the side, and then down some steps. It's possible. It would be a real bummer. So I'm not planning on ever having to do this. From what everybody says in Felder world, that those actual Felder RL series dust collectors are pretty reliable. So hoping that the worst case scenario would be that I'd have to replace a filter inside of it, which is totally possible where I've got this thing at. I'm anchoring these vertical pieces and horizontal top piece into the stucco with some concrete screws, and I've already got the sill plates anchored into the concrete with some Simpson strong tie bolts. And this isn't gonna take any weight on it per se. This is just a structure to hold something inside of it, so I think it's gonna be more than strong enough to handle anything that gets thrown at it over time. As you can see, those winds I was talking about earlier from the fires, is you can see it on the trees back here. Even though this is super protected back here in the corner of my yard, it was definitely windy, and I feel for what happened in the rest of Southern California. It's definitely something that's a huge tragedy. Now, we just got to stand the bitch up against the wall so I can get it in. Seems totally safe. Ah! So now, for the foreseeable future on this video, I'm building out that front wall. So the actual two small 2-foot pieces on either side, I have to cut those sills out of some pressure treated lumber. I've got to attach the seal to the underneath of the actual pieces, and then I've got to lay it out, and you're going to see me cut the pieces and lay them out on the patio. Hard to see, it's kind of off into the corner, but I'm going to lay them out there, and then I'm going to frame them all together, nail them all together, and then I'll off camera actually bring them in and set it up. And then after I get that accomplished, Matt will come back out, and I missed us mounting it. I got the camera on literally right after I mounted it, but you'll see it coming up in just a minute. I nailed this top plate in just to support the pieces. I wasn't positive of the length or whatever. It actually ended up being like an inch wider than the base. So I just kind of knocked it up out of the way to make sure that I had space to put the piece back in when I mounted the front. Pretty legit, huh?
Pretty fucking sick.
Dude, we managed it. I've got the little wiper for the top up here, the amount, and then I've got the things on the side that wipe it too.
Matches the house too.
Pretty close. It's not bad. Okay, now we gotta see if it's
What's that too big?
blocks this off so I can get the dust. Come check it out. It looks nice.
What looks nice?
Come over here so you can see the door.
How heavy is it? Get it up
You want to do it?
Oh, seems like
I didn't really understand the adjustment part of it at this point, so I needed to add a lot of tension to it. It said that maybe you needed to add just 2 rotations of the side, but It works somewhat like a roll-up garage door. It's just only on the side, and you kind of roll up against it, and it adds some more tension. Worked fantastic. And then you had to put a couple of other pieces on it that I added on to limit the travel up, etc. But again, it was super easy to install. Now I'm laying out the rafters and marking them out where they're going to go to cut them. I also had some Simpson strong tie pieces that I mounted to the top to attach the rafters to that plate against the wall. And it's hard to see from this angle, but we'll go through the whole thing. I will tell you, I've only cut bird's mouth out of rafters 2 times in my life. This is the second time. They didn't came out amazing, but they work, and it supports the roof just fine. So I kept going as long as I could to try to get this stuff up. So I got a palm nailer, a Senko palm nailer. Love that thing. It's amazing for putting in some of this Simpson strong tie stuff with some galvanized nails that I had. But it's loud, but it works really, really well. And it's a lot easier than using a nail gun or using a hammer. So regardless, I'm happy I got this as a gift a long, long time ago, and every time I pull it out, it just makes the job so much easier. On the last room I built, I cut the end of the rafter tails at the complementary angle to the side of the building, which in this case would have been 18.5 degrees, give or take. But in this case, the way that they framed it, they didn't do that on this part, so I left it the way it is. Day 2.5. I decided not to record yesterday for 3 reasons. Three. So the first one is I wanted to listen to music because it's a bummer to pull wire. Secondarily, I wanted to go fast because, it is what it is. And then lastly, I didn't want to have to bleep out all of the things that I said because I hate pulling wire through conduit at least. So I had some help from my son, Matt. He was here for the last time before going back to school. So he helped me pull this top piece of plywood off the wall that I needed to be able to get out high outside to put up the conduit. I'll show you that. The conduit, half-inch conduit's right up there. I put it up. It's kind of, you can see it under the eaves on purpose to go all the way down to the other side. All of the cable is run through it except for at the very end. I've got to finish up doing the sheathing today, and then I'll put through the rest of that wiring, wire up all the inside of the actual building out there. So let's get out there and start doing the work. My first plan is to router off those pieces that are kind of covering the opening. I did it that way to make the front of it more stiff because the one piece would go up all the way around and it would hopefully make it a little more firm in the front. So I'm going to reuse those pieces, so I'm going to get a little router trim bit and get it rolling. That little Makita router is fantastic for cutting this stuff out. And I didn't explain it very well, but if you notice closely, I actually changed the header above the door. Originally, I didn't do it with a header because the door doesn't need a header, but then I kind of rethought the idea because it does have to support the roof. So I put a traditional header in there, and then I routed that out on purpose because then the piece of OSB wraps around the actual piece, and then when you nail it up, it makes for a much stiffer door area. So that's kind of why I did it. I talked about firming it up, but it's really about making that whole area stiffer. I'm just cutting some pieces of OSB here to fill up all the spaces that weren't covered by the 8-foot pieces of OSB. So I put a couple of pieces down low on the 2-foot stub walls, and then I'm putting the angle pieces up near the roof and some pieces that are, I guess, inside of them to cover it up. Again, I mean, one cool thing about this project is that I happened to pick a time when OSB was actually affordable and studs were back to a normal price. Now, who knows how long that's going to last, but right now, that's the way it is.
Not sure if I explained why I didn't frame that far wall yet, but I'm gonna roll the dust collector through that on some plywood because it's really heavy. But at the very end, like after I get the hole cut in the wall, all that other kind of stuff. So now onto the roof.
So I snapped a chalk line and I use my little Milwaukee saw to cut off right on that rafter, and then that made it much easier to connect anything else in the future, and also made for way easier lining up of all the other pieces that I was using for this. And I'm just going to let this play out, but it was a little sketchy at the end getting up there because the OSB is pretty slick and there's nothing to fall on behind this. So, but I was as safe as I could be. I had to do the right and the left overhang of the eaves asymmetrical. I got a foot on the one side and then I got 6 inches on the left side. And the reasoning is it wasn't going to be able to get past the fascia board of the main building if I made them the same width. I know it's not optimal, but again, I'm not really worried about the water shedding or anything because the first 12 inches of the top is covered by the eave of the main building. So shouldn't be a ton of water that gets there. And again, the rest of it is all stucco. So again, I wish I could have made them the same, but almost no one will go around this corner to ever see this part of the building. You'll see the other part that looks normal from the patio section. And that's why I was up there measuring earlier to see how far I could overhang it. And then I cut off this piece of OSB widthwise to make sure it would work. I've had this Porter cable framing nailer for a long time. And it's cool because it'll accept, you know, the typical 3 1/4 and then down to 2 inch. And so I think I'm shooting 2 3/8 for the stuff for the OSB into the studs. But it's great because one nailer does both, and it was easy enough. I couldn't find my 2 3/8 nails, so I had to go buy some. But I had all the other stuff that I needed from the nail guns, which was cool. And there we go. All of the pieces of the roof are covered. And now I'm gonna put in some 2x4 blocking underneath to support the pieces that I added in to make sure that there's good nailing spots and they stay flat to the roof. after I got that blocking installed, that I could get back on the roof and I could nail the pieces into the blocking to make sure that I got the stuff nice and tight. So now I'm starting to set up the boxes for the electrical. I've got a three-phase connection in here for 30 amps for the dust collector. I've got a 20 amp 240 volt for the air compressor, and then I've got a 20 amp connection to just run anything out there, but specifically for the air dryer and for the lighting out there. Really basic, easy wiring scenario. Turns into a total disaster later on, but that's for video number 2. So I'll keep you hanging for that. According to Southwire, the amount of conductors I had in the half-inch conduit was more than good enough to pass code, but I was having a tough time getting the conductors to go through this one bend. I had to do an offset bend from the wall into this room, and it was really challenging. It didn't end up being where the problem landed, but it was indicative of maybe that I was just a bit too tight. At this point, I got out my trusty Milwaukee angle drill. That thing is a beast. And some Romex also to finish off this wiring inside of this one side of the room. Again, no drama about how this room was wired. The drama comes later in a different spot. So, anyways, this went pretty swimmingly. It just took some time. The way that I wired this is I have the individual conductors run in the conduit, and then they come into a box, a double gang box, where I transitioned from that to the Romex, and had more than enough space. It's an open plate, so you can get to it to code, and I'm just being super careful up here. It takes forever for me to get this done on video. It was kind of comedy watching this back and editing it because there was so much back and forth and back and forth. Regardless, worked like a champ. This part was, again, the good part. Video number 2, if you've stayed this long in this video, which I'll give you credit if you have, but video number 2 will explain that. Okay, just to show you that something I did previously kind of works. So there's my 3-phase panel, and my new saw, I was told, is a 40 amp draw versus a 30 amp draw.
So in the electrical world, that means I need to change from a 10 gauge cable to an 8 gauge cable. So the cool part was because of how I kind of did this all, and I have this access panel that goes all the way across the shop. It was easy for me to pull it apart, make sure that I had the conduit the way I expected the conduit was, and I basically was able to take each individual conductor out of there, attach it to an 8 gauge, pull that 8 gauge through, and now I have the 3 8 gauge conductors I need right here, the 3 8 gauge conductors I have in the panel. I've got the new plug that I was required for a 40 amp plug and receptacle on order, and then I also have the 40 amp breaker I need on order, and when those come, I'll be able to get this done, patch up this wall right here, and be ready for when the new saw shows up.